The old railway station lay like a skeletal ruin against the bruised twilight sky. Its broken windows were like vacant eyes, staring out over fields that whispered secrets in the wind. It was here, in the decaying heart of this forgotten place, that Lion, Chloe, and Ethan decided to play their game. It was a local legend, a chilling whispered dare amongst the youth of Oak Haven's Stillness Rite. The rules were simple, deceptively so. Find the darkest corner, a place where the air itself felt heavy and still. Lie flat on your back, arms crossed over your chest, like a corpse. For 5 minutes, absolute silence. No twitches, no gasps, not even the faintest murmur. You had to become nothing, void of life, a perfect imitation of the dead. The tale warned that during this time, you became invisible to the living world, but horribly visible to others. And if you failed, if you broke the stillness, it would know you were not dead. It would see you. Skepticism rolled the thrill seeking in your eyes. Lion, ever the cautious one, felt a prickle of unease that had nothing to do with the station's chill. Slow, pragmatic, but drawn to the macabre, checked her watch. Then the daredevil grinned, though the sound held a nervous edge. 5 minutes, he scoffed, kicking idly at a loose floorboard. Piece of cake. Just some old wives' tale to keep kids away from creepy places. They chose the old waiting room. The smoke danced in the last rays of light filtering through a high, grimed street window before plunging the room into near total darkness. The air was thick with the scent of mildew, damp earth, and something else, something faint and metallic like old blood. They lay down side by side on the cold, stone floor. Lion felt the rough grit against his jacket, the profound silence pressing it. The first minute crawled by. The only sound was the frantic beating of his own heart, a drum against the stillness. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to control his breathing, make it shallow, imperceptible. Chloe beside him seemed utterly motionless. Evan, to his other side, was equally still, his initial bravado replaced by rigid tension. And Lion felt it. A change in the air, a deepening of the cold around them. It wasn't just the station's natural chill. This was a deliberate, creeping coldness that seemed to radiate from the very stone. A faint, rustling sound began, like dry leaves skittering across the floor, yet there was no wind inside. It circled them, slow, deliberate. Lion's muscles screamed to twitch, to open his eyes, to see what was making that sound. But the terror of the legend, the game's rule, held him frozen. The rustling stopped right beside Ethan. Lion could feel the tension radiating from his friend. He heard a tiny, involuntary gasp escape Ethan's lips, a mere ghost of a sound, lost almost instantly in the oppressive quiet. Ethan had broken the stillness. The game was over, and Ethan had lost. A new sound began, not rustling, but a soft, wet scraping, like something dragging itself across the stone. It was low, guttural, accompanied by a sound that might have been a whispered word or a dreadful sigh, right next to Ethan's head. Lion's eyes were still squeezed shut, but he felt a hot tear track down his temple. Beside him, Chloe remained eerily still, perhaps too terrified to move, perhaps understanding the terrible penalty for even a twitch now. He heard a sharp intake of breath from Ethan, a sound abruptly cut short. Then, a sickening thought, followed by a series of dragging, bumping noises moving away from them, towards the darker recesses of the station. The cold lifted slightly, replaced by a profound, unnerving silence that was somehow worse than the sounds that had preceded it. Lion lay there for what felt like an eternity after the dragging stopped. His body ached from the forced immobility, but a deeper, colder dread held him captive. He finally forced his eyes open. The darkness was absolute now, save for a sliver of moonlight through the high window. He slowly, stiffly turned his head to the side. Flo was sitting up, her face pale and streaked with tears, her eyes wide with horror. He turned to where Ethan had been. The spot was empty. There was a dark, glistening smear on the stone floor where Ethan's head had been. They scrambled to their feet, their movements clumsy with shock and fear. They didn't speak, didn't dare call out Ethan's name. The station felt vast and empty, yet also profoundly occupied. They fled into the night. The image of that smear burned into their minds, the echo of that wet scraping forever in their ears. The Stillness Rite. They had played. Eden had lost. And whatever it was that the game summoned, it was still here, in the dark, waiting for someone else to pretend they were dead. Liam and Chloe never spoke of that night, not to each other, not to anyone. But sometimes, in the dead of night, when the house is silent and the shadows lay thin, they feel the profound, unnatural cold settle over them. They instinctively freeze, their breath held tight in their lungs, remembering the rule, remembering the cost of breaking the stillness. Because sometimes, they are sure, absolutely sure, they hear a faint, wet scraping sound just outside their door.